Let me find out from you, what do you make of this whole sugar debate? What do you believe to be true, and what are you questioning? For someone who has had suitable experience both in Western Kenya and, of course, with matters sugar.
Thank you for the invitation to this program. You're right. There is so much that has been said about sugar in the recent 1.5 weeks. There is chaff from the wheat, or the wheat from the chaff. I think they should start it off as a question of contaminated sugar, then which is a health matter, a question of public health. It has now metamorphosized or transformed into politics, rivalry of politicians. It has moved into personality politics, personal, character assassinations, etc. In my view, the issue is basically sugar is a food. And being a food, we consume it. It's consumed, mostly grown in Western Kenya, manufactured in Western Kenya, distributed all over Kenya. This country is deficient in sugar production. It does not meet self-sufficiency. On account of that, regulations have been developed to meet that self-sufficiency wherever there's a shortage through imports. Most of these imports usually come from COMESA, because COMESA, of which Kenya is a part, has a free trade agreement amongst members. But now, sometimes COMESA, like Kenya, also has deficiencies. And I think perhaps the current debate is staged in a context in which last year, this country faced deficit in sugar production. The price skyrocketed, I think sometime May last year.
Around in May,
yeah,
that's right.
The price of sugar per kilo was going about 200. And government has to protect its people, consumers. I think government stepped in and allowed imports. Now, ordinarily, in my experience at the Sugar Board, the import regime is governed by certain regulations, which basically specify the importer, the quantities to be brought in, under what conditions and things like that. But what maybe where I agree with the Sabula is, Honorable Sabula, is last year when this deficit in terms of figures, so that we know, 2016, this country produced 639,000 metric tons, 2016. 2017, it produced 377,000 metric tons. So there was that deficit.
Almost by half.
Yes. So there was almost...
Do we know why? Was it a drought issue or a...
Partly drought, but weather.
Okay.
Partly, in my view, farmers did not get enough inputs to put in their production.
Okay.
The problems that bedeviled the sugar factories, a myriad of problems. Farmers are not paid on time, weather, some farmers basically, frustrated, opting out of sugar and things like that. So there wasn't enough meal, age cane to be milled to produce sufficiency. So there was a justification to import.
And which of this do you see more? Do you see it as acts of nature or human interference? Because there are those who say, what if people intentionally create artificial shortages to enable import, to be seen as a godsend?
Both, I would say both.
Okay.
There's acts of nature, which in terms of weather, last year for sure there was drought. Okay. Let's not forget that. And not only just in Kenya, even within the Southern African region, from which Kenya sometimes import a good number of importers, bring in duty-free sugar. I say that it's important because this sugar we're talking about right now is sugar that is claimed to have come from Brazil. And Brazil is not a member of COMESA. So any sugar outside of COMESA needs to be taxed. So there was that element of natural weather conditions, but there's also basically issues of mismanagement in sugar factories, particularly state-owned sugar factories, where I think arising from a myriad of issues that perhaps we don't have time to go through, farmers get frustrated. They are not paid on time. Sugar takes about 18 months to harvest. You harvest, then you take 1 year. I'll give my own example. I am contracted to Nzoia Sugar Factory. I harvest my cane in March. Up to now, I've not been paid. So if at my level, I've not been paid, for sure, How about my mother who never went to school and is a farmer? Who
was not able to lobby to get the payout.
So these are some of the problems that, frustrate farmers. They are unable to take care of their farms, operations. They don't have money. to buy fertilizer, and sometimes the fertilizer that comes is, there is a question mark. I think I've had the DPP refer to some fertilizer that I think, if you're talking about sugar that is unfit for human consumption, there was a time in this country, I think, fertilizer that was applied, I think, was not good fertilizer.
Do you think, or do you believe that millers should be allowed to import sugar?
Yes. What's the problem? They're just
conflict of interest?
Not at all.
Is it cheaper to import than to try and...
It's true. Imported sugar is cheap. Why? It's because it's tax-free. Sugar here is expensive. Why? Because there's so much taxes on it.
Imported sugar from COMESA?
From COMESA is duty-free.
What about those who say that what comes in as COMESA is not actually from COMESA?
No,
that people repackage somewhere and...
Correct. So there is a problem when it comes to imports from COMESA. There's something that people don't seem to talk about and people need to understand. There's something called the rules of origin. In the COMESA Free Trade Area Agreement, there is something about rules of origin whereby something originating from Egypt, which is a member, imagine Egypt is north of Africa there, and it's a member of COMESA. Uganda is a member of COMESA. Tanzania is not a member of COMESA, but is a member of East African Community. So the rules of origin, I think a certain percentage of value addition to some item will qualify it to be a COMESA product. So you could bring maybe a product from America or Britain, let's say in Egypt, and do one or two things with it, manipulate it in Egypt, manipulate it in one way or other, then it will arrive in the next COMESA country as originating from COMESA. It has to do with the rules of origin within the COMESA rules of business.
Do you think the system can be manipulated? Is that what you're trying to say?
That's what I'm saying. The system can be manipulated. The trade rules are such that it's manipulable. Now, back to your question about whether millers are allowed to import or not. Millers, first of all, are commercial, organizations, and being commercial organizations, they can import sugar. The problem in terms of imports is they understand the capacities required for the country's consumption. And sometimes in terms of sugar production, it's a question at one time of too much sugar or too much sugar cane. At another time, there is very little sugar or very little sugar cane. So it's a cycle. So that cycle sometimes creates conditions or situations in which now imports are a must.
Okay.
Structurally, the country is deficient. And this is not just yesterday, right from the beginning. The only time Kenya has been self-sufficient, I think, was about 1970 or 1969. So
we're talking about a 40-year problem.
Yes, that's the only time that Kenya was self-sufficient. Just a year or 1 or 2 years. Since then, we have not been self-sufficient. And to mitigate that, COMESA safeguard rules came into being. In other words, quantitative restrictions were put into the import regime. You cannot import that much.
There's a limit.
Yeah, there's a limit.
Okay.
Yeah. So that element of safeguards are there, and you could only bring it from COMESA and not outside COMESA.
My question to you is, and again, I might sound like I'm repeating myself.
Yes.
Why would I, as a miller, have any enthusiasm to deal with local farmers if I know that I can make double the profit when the window for import happens? Especially in a window like the one that was there last year. Yes. What incentive is there for me as a miller? Because that's what Savula was arguing yesterday. He was saying, take this power away from the millers. Let them focus on getting their products, what they use to mill sugar from the local farmers. That will motivate them.
Okay, maybe let me explain it this way. The position that seems to be pervading in Kenya is that imports are bad. Which
looks
is wrong,
it.
which is not the correct position. 2, that imports are the ones that damage the sugar industry. Maybe yes and no. But in my view, not necessarily yes. Why? I'll give you an example. Mauritius. Mauritius imports all its sugar for consumption that it consumes. And it exports all the sugar that it produces. And remember, Mauritius is the largest sugar producer in Africa. It exports all the sugar.
Wait, it imports, repackages, and then exports? Oh,
no.
Yeah.
All that it produces, it sells to Europe to get dollars, through which they use for their most valuable imports that they require as a country.
Okay.
Then they import, because imported sugar is cheap. You know, sugar is unique. Sugar,
so they sell what? Sell at a profit and then import?
Sugar is not subject to the normal economics. If you have studied economics at the University of Nairobi, when it comes to sugar, you need to refine your economics. You cannot subject it to the economics of maize. Sugar is unique in the sense that, you know, it's an addictive commodity. Remember that, like tobacco. It's a lot of money. You know, sugar traders are called barons. I mean, they are only one
similar to drug barons.
Exactly. Sugar, like tobacco, it's subject to taxation. It's a subject of power. So it's in that sense that I'm saying sugar that is traded. Most countries defend their sugar industries. Sugar that is traded on the world market is what they call residual sugar. So sugar trade on the world market is a residual market. It's not a normal market, let's say, that meets this normal market forces that you and I started in school about market. No, it's residual sugar that is cheap. Two, if you come to the world's largest producer of sugar, Brazil. Sugar in Brazil is a byproduct. It's not the main product. Brazil's objective in sugar production is ethanol and other elements. So sugar becomes a byproduct.
Almost like a by the way.
By the way.
In a sense.
That is now what comes here as a cheap element. Because here the taxes are too much and a lot of restrictions, so it's expensive.
So the government's policy on sugar in Kenya
makes it very expensive. No doubt about it. It has to do with the government policies. It's not because of the market forces. If market forces were allowed, sugar would probably be cheap.
Your take, and you have held two very interesting roles. You've been the chairperson of the Kenya Sugar Board. Yes. You've also been a legislator.
Yes.
One of the, I think it was either Honorable Halwale, Honorable Savula, yesterday made a very interesting allegation that when MPs discovered that importing sugar is a profitable business, when the political class discovered that you can make money off this, that is when then the situation got completely out of hand. It's almost like a game now.
It's a game, but you see, as I say, the regulations are there. Let's put it last year's issue in context.
Okay.
There is a sugar directorate under AFA.
Formerly Kenya Sugar Board.
Formerly Kenya Sugar Board.
Okay.
Now, let's say AFA has regulations of import and export of sugar. Under those regulations, for you to qualify to import sugar, you need to be licensed. There's an annual licensing. So there is a list of importers if you went to Kenya Sugar Board. You pay 150 per year. It's a yearly
150,000.
Yes.
Okay.
After you pay to import sugar, you apply. I, Saulo Busolo, want to import sugar. And to import this sugar, I have to produce a certificate of pre-shipment, a certificate of where I'm getting the sugar from, an invoice of how much that sugar is costing, a certificate of Bureau standards, you know, that sugar, does it conform to the Kenya Bureau of Standards? So these rules are there. It's just that they are abused. What happened last year, this Gazette notice allowed anybody to bring in sugar.
Even those who had not necessarily followed that procedure.
Precisely. So AFA or Sugar Board was out of it because the regulations are clear.
Why would we allow just anybody? What was the thinking? Was the situation so dire, or was it a chance now for everyone to get into this?
I think we are in agreement the situation was dire, but the mode of mitigating that situation is where there's a question mark. But even in terms of where we are, the so-called contamination, you know, sugar is also, to qualify in terms of import for some commodity like sugar, there is pre-shipment inspection in the country of origin. And at the
so if you're getting it from Brazil, for example, there should be an inspection on that side.
Absolutely. Kenya Bureau of Standards has reciprocal arrangements with their counterparts wherever you get an item that you bring into this country. They must conform to the standards in this country. Then when that commodity or item arrives at the port of Mombasa, again, it's also inspected. I've seen even, I think, one of today's paper, there's a gentleman called Kamau, I think a journalist, writes investigative journalist, and he seems to be laying out a claim upon certain agencies that are responsible for what he claims are the issues of sugar. And the giant Kisera, I think, also.
But
where I think there's a missing gap, what is the Department of Public Health?